For property crimes where you would absolutely need to defend yourself from a home invasion, 45% of response time fell under 11 minutes to an hour.
If the feds tried to do that, disarm this country, I said you would see an uprising and maybe a version of the Second American Revolution because of that. Just read the Declaration of Independence. You know, it's right in there. So the feds coming in and going into homes, forcing their way into homes and removing firearms. I mean, the thought is preposterous.
Even Interpol Secretary General Ronald Noble suggested an answer to the bloodshed in Kenya could be in arming civilians. It only took 9 attackers to wipe out 148 Kenyans at Garissa University. Just 4 to kill 67 Kenyans in last year's Westgate Mall shooting. And only a few terrorists to kill 213 and injure 4,000 in the 1998 Nairobi embassy bombings. Had the Kenyan students been armed, the horror would have been largely avoided. With the passing of Kenyan President Kenyatta's controversial security bill, basically making free speech and freedom of the press a crime, Kenya is spiraling into the throes of a full-blown police state, a petri dish for the power elite's Trojan horse psyop waged on citizens worldwide. Somali terror group Al-Shabaab has threatened Kenyan cities will run red with blood. This will be a long, gruesome war, which you, the Kenyan public, are its first casualties. Al-Shabaab also warned no amount of precaution or safety measures will be able to guarantee your safety, thwart another attack, or prevent another bloodbath. John Bound for INFOWARS.com.
Another major health threat, this one in Toledo, Ohio, where everybody in the entire city has been told not to drink the water.
Ohio's governor declaring a state of emergency.
Did you know that the average person uses about 80 to 100 gallons of water at home every single day? If there's a water emergency, will you be prepared?
Panicked residents forming long lines throughout the day.
We're here at a supermarket in Toledo. You can see the shelves empty where water once was.
To stay safe and healthy during a crisis, you must have access to safe, clean water. Water which will not be available at your local grocery store.
There's a mad dash on right now to stock up on supplies.
The ProPure Pro 1 G2.0 water filtration system is a must-have for every modern, independently minded household. Protect your family's safety during an emergency. Go to InfoWarsStore.com today to purchase your ProPure Pro 1 G2.0 water filtration system or call 1-888-253-3139.
Used since before the days of the Roman Empire to support the body's natural systems and enhance overall health. Introducing the new InfoWarsLife.com oil of oregano formulation, a highly advanced nutraceutical form of this key herb that has been traditionally used by civilizations for thousands of years to promote health. We have now procured the most high quality and potent forms of oregano oil on the market, sourced from top leading manufacturers to ensure a concentrated level of bioactive ingredients. Extracted directly from the wild herb and sealed in easy-to-use capsules, you will no longer need to endure the burning of liquid oregano on the tongue. Wild crafted from the Mediterranean oregano species that experts agree is one of the most powerful and most challenging to acquire. This winter season, it's more important than ever to secure this true form of oil of oregano. Now available in our limited first run at InfoWarsLife.com. That's InfoWarsLife.com or call 888-253-3139.
We oftentimes showcase questionable police encounters. And while there may not be much of a remedy for a hot-headed officer, if you encounter a competent officer who respects the Constitution, we have some tips that you need to follow. And with more on this, we have Eddie Craig of Rule of Law Radio. All right, thank you for joining us today, Eddie.
Thanks for having me on.
Okay, so we hear a lot about people filming the police. You know, they encounter the police, whether it be a traffic stop or someplace else. We talked about just earlier in the show about the unfortunate incident in South Carolina, and somebody just happened to be filming the officer as he shot a man in the back, you know, pretty much killed the guy. So can you explain to us the importance of the civilian or just the normal person being able to film a police officer in the commission of their duties?
Well, it's extremely important. Right now, there is almost no level of public accountability for law enforcement and various other government entities for that matter. Without the power of the video and the audio recordings, there would be a lot of people in jail right now, in prison, being convicted for crimes they never committed because officers have falsified the reports they filed, trumped up charges on people just to cover their own wrongdoing. The camera is the only eye we have into that after the fact. Eyewitness testimony can be discredited. The camera is a whole lot more difficult to discredit.
Right.
So it's extremely important.
So we see this all over the country, but particularly here in Texas, they're trying to pass through a bill. I believe it's 125 feet. You cannot film the officer, which is to say, if you were engaged in a traffic stop, I'm the officer. You can't film me because I'm within that 125 feet. Does that set a chilling precedent?
It would if it would actually be able to pass. It very well would. But then again, it would also run directly afoul of current rulings by the U.S. Supreme Court, and it would not be a difficult thing to have that law declared unconstitutional on its face for that particular violation. But at the same time, the problems it would create on the accountability issue we've just discussed would be astronomical.
Right. Now, Eddie, why we have you on here today is to talk about the reasons why police are pulling people over more and more. You know, it's gone beyond speeding, and we'll talk about that as well. But here in Texas, as well as many other places around the country, they're coming up with new reasons just to pull you over. Let's say you have your cell phone out. You know, they just passed that here in the city of Austin. You're driving around, maybe you're looking at your GPS. If you're looking at a map, if you're distracted any kind of way, they can pull you over and, Mr. Craig, we see that you're driving distracted. Can you explain to us the significance of this precedent?
Well, the first thing is this is both the city of Austin through its ordinance program and the state itself in an upcoming bill attempting to legislate human behavior. And that's simply not feasible. It's not going to work. The only thing that it's really going to provide is a steady revenue stream for both parties, the state and the city, which deep down we would have to consider to be its true intended purpose. None of this would actually impact public safety one way or the other any differently, I don't think. In fact, it would probably make it worse, because now if someone gets an unexpected phone call and they're expecting something important or whatever, they're going to try to answer it, but they've also got to now be worried about whether or not there's a cop present that would catch them doing so. Not everybody can afford hands-free devices and things like that in their car. So the issue is that this isn't really about public safety. And for them to put it out there as if it is can easily be disproven if you really think about it. The argument, I believe y'all had an attorney on the show here a few weeks ago that was discussing this particular ordinance. I actually saw part of that show, and I was really wishing I was on set at the time and able to go toe-to-toe with this guy.
Tell us the issue you had with it.
Well, the issue I had was the fact that it's ordinance-based to begin with. What most people in the state, and including those that are making them, fail to realize is that ordinances are not binding law on the public. I know that the states and the prosecutors and the city attorneys, they all want you to believe it is, but the problem is the state constitution says they're not. We gave only one legislative body power to create law binding upon the public, and that was the Texas legislature. It was not the municipalities. What the legislature did to empower that concept, which we'll be doing a presentation on here if I'm not mistaken, was actually very, very unconstitutional. They attempted to convey a power that the courts themselves have ruled they can't convey, which is the ability to legislate. And they did that through nothing more than the creation of statutory definitions. And in the presentation, I will show you exactly how they attempted to do that. But the ordinances themselves are not law binding upon the public. They can't be. We didn't authorize municipalities to create law binding upon the people.
All right, and what Eddie's talking about here, we'll discuss in a presentation that is going to premiere next week. He's going to shoot with us right after the show, but let's get back into it, Eddie. We were talking about speeding, and you brought up something very interesting to me, something that I didn't know. He talked to us about speeding limits and how they are set.
Yes, there is a problem with the way they're prosecuting speeding charges here in Texas. The two statutes involving speeding are 545.351 and 352 of the Transportation Code. Most municipalities, the prosecutors attempting to prove only the elements of 545.351 subsection A. The problem with the language of subsection A is that it's vague, ambiguous, overbroad, and highly subjective to the opinion of whoever's making the allegation. The language there more or less simply reads, that a person commits an offense if they operate a motor vehicle to speed other than is reasonable and prudent under the circumstances then existing. There is no criteria in A for what the circumstances then existing are that would make it an offense. There is no criteria for what reasonable and prudent is under that statute. Those provisions are detailed in subsection B of 351. And subsection B is where the meat of the speeding charge actually comes in, but they never prove the elements that are in it. But the required elements is that the person failed to exercise due care so that by the excessive speed they were traveling, they were involved with a collision with another person or vehicle lawfully entering or already upon the highway. And Texas only has prima facie speed limits. Prima facie simply means, as I discussed in my other presentation, on its face or at first glance or until proven incorrect is what prima facie really means. So, for example, the prima facie speed limit on most of the roads around Austin, out on 35, for instance, is 60. Mm-hmm. Let's say you're doing 70 and an officer pulls you over. At that time, the officer has witnessed no collision, nothing except you going faster than the posted speed limit. And so they have no way of proving the elements of subsection B because no collision occurred.
So they can't say that you were driving reckless.
They can't say that you were acting unreasonably because there's nothing to base that on except the subjective opinion of the officer. And the officer is not qualified to offer subjective opinion in testimony in court. But that's exactly what they're asking the officer to do. The problem with the way they're doing it on that speed is that if you demonstrated that no collision occurred at the 70 miles per hour, then who was to say that your actions were neither reasonable nor prudent under the circumstances? Because, as the saying goes, no harm, no foul. Mm-hmm. And
no victim, no crime.
Exactly. And the Texas speeding statutes clearly have taken that into consideration. There are a total of 15 separate elements in a speeding charge. If you follow the statute the way it's laid out, there are 15 elements required to be proven. They never prove more than 6 to 9 of those. And the problem is that in any criminal case, they are required as a matter of due process to prove every single element in an accusation. They don't ever do it. In fact, the Texas District and County Attorneys Association publishes a book that says very clearly in that book that in Texas, speeding in and of itself is not an offense. Now, why would they say that? They say that because it's a prima facie speed limit. If you can demonstrate that you caused no harm, okay, and your speed was not in such an excessive degree as to be considered criminally negligent, then speeding can't be charged against an individual just because they're going faster than the posted speed limit, which brings an issue up for the officer who pulls you over. The officer is going to be questioned on the stand. What's the color of the car that you saw me collide with? Well, you didn't hit anybody. Did I hit a pedestrian? Well, no, you didn't hit anybody. There's no one saying you hit anybody. Then, officer, please explain to me. If all you saw was me traveling faster than the posted speed limit under the condition of Texas having prima facie speed limits, what is your articulable probable cause to suspect me of actually committing a crime that gave you the ability to pull me over in the first place? Mm-hmm. They never want to answer that because they can't. There is no answer for it. And most attorneys will say, well, the probable cause was the violation of the prima facie speed limit. Well, unfortunately, that only jives if you're trying to prove subsection A. It doesn't jive if you are also requiring the elements of subsection B.
Right. Now, what you're talking about here is, I guess you're talking about Texas in particular, but this can apply to other states and other...
It would apply in every state with a prima facie speed limit, and I don't know of any that aren't prima facie.
Good. Okay, now we'll get more into this in your presentation, but let's have a brief demonstration. Let's say I pull you over. Okay, so I pull over, hey, Mr. Craig, I'm State Trooper Jackson. I saw you were speeding in your vehicle. Can I see your license and your registration? To which you would reply.
Officer, can any of the information that you are requesting from me be used against me in a court of law or to potentially incriminate me in any way?
I'll say yes.
If you even understand the question, you'll say yes. But Most of the time, they will attempt to avoid it. But you are correct. If they said yes, then, officer, I invoke my right to remain silent, and I cannot provide you with that information and documentation.
Now, let me stop you right there, because